Let's talk a little bit about pneumatics and hydraulics. The two different systems use, one of them, hydraulics, uses fluids, and pneumatics uses air. Now, a lot of times they're referred to both air and a liquid. Air and a liquid are referred to as fluid power, just because they have so much in common. One thing they do not have in common is the difference between a gas and a liquid is that you can compress a gas, but you cannot compress a liquid. And we'll talk about the importance of that in just a minute. But basically you can see how this is hooked up, and this again is just air. All right, and watch one more time to see how that works. Now in this I have water, all right? And because we cannot compress the water, a lot of times the movement is a little smoother and it responds a little more quickly. In a classroom use, the problem with water basically is it can be very messy. Another thing that you could use even in place of water would be some type of oil, like cooking oil, but again, if things come loose, it makes a big mess. The tubing that I use for this is simply aquarium tubing that you can get at Walmart. It's fairly inexpensive. The syringes I get from a company called Pittsco. You can actually buy them at animal health supply stores, although they might look at you kind of funny if you come in and buy 20 syringes. But you can still do that, and the tubing fits really nicely inside the syringe. And you just press it in place. There is a little trench here or a gap, and the thickness of the wall of the tubing fits right in that gap, and it works really well. If you have problems with that and it doesn't stay in place, then what you need to do is you can use some hot glue, but you want to make sure you squirt the hot glue inside that opening, inside that gap, and then don't burn your fingers, but press that in place. And especially if you're using liquid, that works really well because the hot glue will seal it a little better so that the liquid doesn't dry. One of the common applications, and this is something that it's reflected a little bit in the PowerPoint that's on Canvas for you. One of the common applications for pneumatics and hydraulics is in brake systems of cars. Now, in your car, you have a fluid brake system, but in large vehicles like tractor trailer trucks, big trucks that carry a lot of freight, they do not use fluid power, they use an air system. Remember, we mentioned that air can be compressed, which is not a good thing necessarily in a brake system, because what could happen is you would press your foot on the brake, and especially if it's cool outside, if you remember from Cindy's ice cream demonstration, as a gas gets cooler, all right, it condenses. So if you have condensed air in an air-powered brake system, it's not going to work immediately. So what those big trucks use are compressors, and so that compressor always keeps the air brake system charged to a certain amount. I think on our school buses it's 90 pounds per square inch, but it always keeps that system charged up to a certain amount, so there's always the right amount of pressure in the brake lines and in that air brake system. Sometimes, maybe in the summertime, if you had your windows in your car rolled down and you pull up beside a big truck at a stoplight and you hear it go shh, what's happening there is it's bleeding excess air out of that system. So it has a valve, and the valve senses when there's too much air because you don't want to blow a line carrying the air. So it releases pressure. So even though the driver isn't putting his foot on the brake, the system is automatically releasing the air pressure. We use those in big trucks because they can scale up to that size a little bit easier than fluid power does. And because the truck is bigger and heavier anyway, it can carry the weight of that compressor system without too much trouble. And I know from previous experience just driving school buses that have air brakes, they work exceedingly well. They work really, really well.